Welcome back to Hockey Thoughts with Scott. This is the Sunday Thoughts segment. Each week on Sunday, most likely going to record them on Saturday night like I'm doing right now. I'm going to give you some takes about what's happened during the week, things that are happening in the league. Once the season gets back into a regular season mode, I'm going to try to put together a power ranking and just give my general thoughts about things that are going on. So I got several takes I do want to get into. And let's get started with take number one. My first take has to do with what happened earlier today at about 10:30 a.m. And that was Tuukka Rask opting out of the NHL return to play. Now, I don't have a problem with Tuukka Rask opting out. The man's got a family, and family is first and foremost. Anytime you have wife, kids, that has to be your first priority. You don't know what's happening in the background. You don't know if one of the kids has a special needs, if something else is going on within the family itself, where it's just best for him to not be around the team at this point. So, for him to opt out, I don't have a problem with it. I've seen people on the Twitter sphere saying, "Why didn't you do this back in July? Why did you get to this point and then after 2 games in and an hour and a half before Game 3 you decide to opt out?" This may have been something where he wanted to play. There may have been some pressures from home. We don't know the full situation, and Boston has a capable goalie, a guy that can be a number one on a lot of other teams in Jarl Halak. I don't think his loss is going to be overly significant. However, if something happens to Halak and then they have to go to Max Legacy, Dan Villar, now you're talking a bigger problem. But as it stands right now, no problem with him opting out. So that's my first take. However, another interesting wrinkle that I did read earlier today had to do with potentially Rask retiring. So let's get to take number 2, and that has to do with the goalie free agent market. Now, the goalie free agent market is going to be very, very interesting in my opinion. And I'm going to try to bring this up here. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can get this to show up. That's not going to show up. Alright, so what I wanted to do is I wanted to get into and just talk a little bit about the goalies that are going to be free agents. And let me just slide this over real quick and we'll get into this here. So when we talk about the goalies that are going to be free agents, and I'm using Cap Friendly, and I'm going to put a link to what I have on the screen here in the description of the video. So when we talk about the goalies and we talk about UFA goalies specifically, there's a couple UFA goalies that are going to be available that are going to command some big money, but there's not a lot that's going to be out there. And the ones I'm thinking at this point is going to be Robin Lehner is going to be up there, Jacob Markstrom, Braden Holtby, and to a lesser extent Anton Khudobin and Thomas Greiss. Those are the 5 that I see as the top 5 UFA goalies. If Rask does retire, now you're going to throw Boston into that market, along with a whole host of other teams that it's going to be in the goalie market, including Buffalo, Detroit, possibly Ottawa. Pittsburgh's going to be in that market because they have to deal with Jari and Murray, both as RFAs. One of them's probably going to move along. The Rangers is going to be one to potentially consider. And there's a lot of teams that may be looking at upgrading their backup. Winnipeg, the Devils, Minnesota. What are they going to do with Darcy Kemper? I mean, you've got Kaapo Kähkönen kind of in the wings waiting. He's an RFA. I think he's going to get signed. But if you throw another team like Boston in that market, how does that change the outlook of the goalies? I think it's something to keep an eye on. I don't necessarily think he's necessarily going to retire, but it may not be out of the realm of possibility. So again, I think it's something just to be mindful of. We're going to get more into free agency, especially as we get closer to the end of the playoffs. Talk about who's going to be available, what potentially is going to happen. And from a goalie standpoint, another name that's not on this list is going to be Jake Allen. Does St. Louis decide to trade Jake Allen to give him a chance to be a starter somewhere else, since the net is clearly Jordan Binnington's? So that is my second take. Now, speaking of the playoffs, I do want to get into the playoffs a little bit more with my third take here. Now, on the third take itself, let's talk about what's happened in the playoffs so far. And I would be remiss if I started or didn't start talking about Game 1 of the playoffs, the official playoffs, the 8 overtime marathon between Columbus and Tampa Bay. There were some people, again, out on Twitter looking to shorten overtime in the playoffs and all that. Absolutely not. You play to a winner. You play to win the game. It's one thing to have a shortened version of an overtime in the regular season, going to a shootout, because you don't want to play all night. But when it gets to the playoffs, you play till you get a winner. There is nothing like it in any other sport, but when you get to basketball, you play till you have a winner. Baseball, you play till you have a winner. Football is a little bit different in the way they've got their overtime set up. So that is something to be mindful of. Now, the other piece of the puzzle here that I do want to talk about is I do want to talk about what's happening in this series at this point. And I want to start with the game that just ended. Vegas going up 3-0 on Chicago. Raise your hand if you thought Chicago had a shot in this series to begin with. I don't think many people had Chicago winning this series. Vegas simply has too much going, has too many pieces, so to speak. They're a fantastic team. They're a fantastically built team. I think Vegas is going to end up going pretty deep. I don't know if they're going to be raising the cup in about 6-7 weeks, but they're one of the few teams. There's a few teams in there that you could have that discussion. Boston may still be one of those teams, even with Tuukka, Rask being gone, and they're now up 2-1 on the Hurricanes. Let's talk about the other series I do want to talk about here is Philadelphia and Montreal. They're tied 1-1. Carey Price is playing out of his mind. He was the equalizer against Pittsburgh. He's going to be the equalizer in this series as well. Montreal goes as far as Carey Price takes them. And you talk about people leaving the bubble. If Carey Price had to leave the bubble for any reason, Montreal, in my opinion, may have to leave the bubble as well. So that's just something to be mindful of. I mean, that's a real thing to keep in mind, is that teams are going to be as good as their best player. Montreal is there. Most of the other series are 2-1 or 1-1 at this point. I am looking forward to watching tomorrow afternoon that Caps Islanders series. I enjoy watching Washington. I actually enjoy watching the Islanders. I know I'm probably one of the few people who can say that. On one of my fantasy teams, I've actually got 3 Islanders. So there's a little bit of a fantasy aspect to it as well. What I want to do is I want to get to a royal take here. Now, this royal take is from my Buffalo Sabres and what they did this week. The Buffalo Sabres went back for the first time since 1996 to the royal blue. The color scheme is virtually the original color scheme. They made a little bit of an update to the buffalo itself. There's some embroidery on the buffalo that looks really cool. You can't necessarily see on the inset that's on the screen at this point. But if you want to take a look at, find that, it is there. It's gorgeous. I'm probably not going to buy one. I still have my original Pro jersey. So that's something just to be mindful of. One other take that I do have here, that I do want to talk about here, and this is going to be the final take that I do have, is the bubbles. The bubbles are working. The bubbles are working in hockey. They've been working in basketball, even though the NBA is down in Florida. The bubble down there is working as well. I haven't seen any reports in the NBA bubble having issues. There's been 0 positive COVID tests within the NHL bubble. And the reason why I bring that up is because there was another positive test today. I believe it was in Pittsburgh. The Pirates Red series. That series is now postponed, depending on which team it is. Their games are going to probably be pushed back further. St. Louis, the Cardinals have only played 7 games. The Marlins had their issues. I mean, the way this is happening in baseball, the NHL needs to take note of what's happening, especially once it gets past the playoffs and they start thinking about next season. Because as it stands right now, the Winter Classic is still scheduled for January 1st between Minnesota and St. Louis. The All-Star game is still scheduled. There's an outdoor game that's scheduled in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, with the Hurricanes. I don't know exactly offhand who they're playing. Those are all on the NHL official schedule. I looked at that tonight. If there's going to be any type of issues that are still happening come September, come October, especially with the NFL starting up their season and they're not going into a bubble, don't be surprised if the NHL pushes back the start of their season potentially from December, and they may want to look at starting January 1 with the Winter Classic. Again, that's just something to be mindful of. I don't know if they're necessarily going to go with bubbles again. I don't think you can do a bubble. You'd have to do more bubbles, especially for divisional games and all those, all that. I just hope that everything is starting to take the turn to the positive side with COVID-19. So those are my thoughts for the week. If you have ideas, if you have comments, anything that I brought up here, Go ahead and leave those comments down below. If you enjoy what I'm doing, go ahead and hit subscribe. Hit that bell so this way any new videos that do come out, you're going to get notified of those right away. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. Thank you for watching. We'll be back later next week with some more additional take videos where we're going to get into a little bit more in depth, looking at future expansion. That's one of the videos I'm working on for next week. See you then.